History, pre-examination, right? And all of you are having this history as optional paper, right? So basically in this class we are going to discuss what is the challenge actually behind this particular paper. Actually why definitely this paper is scoring, right? But people are not scoring very good in this paper. So what is the reason behind that? In what way you are supposed to write your answers? These kind of challenges are there. Before I discuss this particular thing, these particular things, let me discuss history is having vast syllabus that all of you know. The syllabus is definitely big. So what do you think? Are you supposed to read everything, whatever is given in the syllabus, or you are supposed to be specific, or you must confine yourself within some topics, or you have to go through every topic which have been given in the syllabus? How many of you have given the means last time? Okay, 3-4 guys. And what was your score? 230. 220. 208. But not last year, no? Not last year. Last year only. Okay. 160. Last year only. 2014 means. Anybody else? No. And what was the average score last year? Those candidates who got selected in this UPSC, what was the score for them? At least last year, if you'll see the pattern of last year, at least you must secure 250 plus. Because if you'll see the pattern of 2013, then obviously somebody is scoring 213 or 220. So that was also considered to be a good score, but not for the last year, 2014. Yes, so what was the change actually? The question was quite simple. Is simple as compared to the paper of 2013. And the another thing that now people got actually, came to know what kind of references have to be consulted, right? So these kind of changes are there. In last year 2013 the paper 1 was very tough, slightly it was tough. In 2014 the paper was slightly easy, history paper 1. So these kind of things are there. So as the question I put forward, that what kind of things you must go through in the syllabus, that should be, you must be very clear, and the kind of clarity should be there, that that is very important. So do you guys have any idea for that? The syllabus is very big. How many topics are there total? 50? How many chapters are there? 52. In first there are 24 and the second 27. But there are so many smaller subtopics are there. So in what way you are supposed to finish the syllabus in coming 3 months? And what is the greater detail?
Those 3 questions which you are supposed to answer, you should be in a position to answer.
But now the problem is that they are asking the questions in segments, right? In every question there were at least 2 to 3 questions. Earlier in the second paper they used to ask 2 questions, but this time they have increased the number. They have started asking 3 questions. So there, what is the problem actually? It may be possible that you have covered the syllabus extensively. Then what is happening? It might be possible that in 2 of the questions you are quite comfortable, but it might be possible that in 1 question you are not comfortable, right? So these kind of problems are there. So what is the solution? So first, let us discuss first what to read, then how to write. Right? Because that is very important to understand what to read. If you don't know what to read, then it's very tough to understand how to write. So let us first discuss what to read actually. So definitely, as you know, the paper, it's history. So history basically is the study of how many people are actually, please raise your hands who are support in the past. That based on
Texts.
so text is the only source.
Studies through archaeology, then it is called prehistory.
Acha. So you want to say that for the Mauryan period we are not using the archaeology?
We do use,
Then
but that part of ancient past which is studied exclusively through archaeology, but we can't call it a historic period, we call it as a prehistory.
that is a different thing. You are just talking about this, categorization of history on the basis of sources, prehistory, proto-history and history, right? So these are the categorization of history on the basis of the sources, but this is not important. Basically, the history has been categorized as ancient, medieval, and modern. This is the main categorization, and the categorization is based upon some of the transitions actually from one phase to another phase. Like this is a different thing. I'm simply asking a question: what is history? Suppose this question I'm putting forward to you. I'm giving to you. So what is the history? So what should be the right interpretation for that? Right answer for that? What is history? It's very simple question. Suppose this is the first question of 10 marks. Then what way you are supposed to define it? What is history?
Systematic study of the past.
And what is the systematic study? Scientific study. Right. And what is scientific study?
Taking all the evidences, corroborating one evidence with another evidence.
So do you think that if we are taking all the evidences, so then it is possible to write a objective history or right history? No. Definitely many things happened in the past, but all the things are not important. That is what actually I'm looking for, right? In history, definitely we are studying the history of the society or the past of the society. But the society, the society is very important. So the first thing is the society. And what is the second thing? That society has seen actually many transformations, right? And those transformations have to be understood. Right. So basically this transformation could be defined as continuity and change in the society. Suppose you are moving from the Vedic age to the Mahajanpada age or Mahajanpada period, right? So there should be a right interpretation for that. What are the things or what are the systems of the societies have changed and what kind of things have continued actually. So that continuity and the change, if you're understanding that continuity and change, then only you can understand the history. If you're seeing the history, you can see the question papers for last couple of years. Then they have changed their patterns of the questions also. In what way they are asking the questions, like from 750 AD to 1200 AD. Is there any change? Why they have changed? Why they have started asking such kind of questions actually? Have you ever thought on that? Earlier they didn't used to ask such kind of questions. So why they have changed their pattern? Okay, fine, just leave this question. Have you seen the definitely you guys have seen the old NCERT, right? And how many of you have seen the new NCERT? Only 3-4, right? So is there any change between this old NCERT and the new NCERT? More interpretation based. And what is the title of the new NCERT? Themes, right? Actually we have changed our way to study the history, but people have still reading in the same way. I mean, you guys have, for the modern India, you might have read this Bipin Chandra, Max to Max, Sekhar Bandyopadhyay, right? Or in ancient Indian history, which one? R.S. Sharma, D.N. Jha, now Upinder Singh, right? So these are the books you are going through. Nobody has gone through this Ranveer Chakravarti or Sireen Ratnagar, right? Actually, no, these kind of things are not important. Actually, we have changed our way to study the history, and now we are studying the history on themes basis, right? And what kind of themes? How many of you seen the MA IGNOU materials? Only 3, right? And if you are not seeing such kind of material, it's very tough to secure good marks in history. I'm telling you very clearly actually. Because if you are going through the same books which people used to study for last 10 or 12 years, just by reading the same books you cannot score good in history. So yes, you have to change your pattern of studying the history, then only you can secure some good marks in history. So definitely I was talking about themes. So that is the new change actually in history. So definitely there are certain themes, and if you guys have seen the IGNOU material, the IGNOU materials have been written like there are some themes like political, and this is one of the important aspects of society as well, right? And then what should be the next? Then somebody was saying social. Okay, fine. Then so these are the themes in history, right? And now you just categorize the syllabus in such a way that suppose this is the political aspect of society. So in political aspect, what actually you are supposed to study? You are not supposed to study everything. And if you are reading such kind of things, so you are just wasting your time. So in the political, as far as the political aspect of the society is concerned, the first. MA. The IGNOU material of graduation have been written for last, I guess, somewhere around 1975 or 80, right? And now this is the year 2000. So how many years have already passed? 35 years. So history has actually gone, numerous changes in last 30 or 35 years, right? All of you must be knowing about this subaltern historiography, right? Subaltern historiography. And you just see your questions. They are asking the questions like, describe the life of a common man during Gupta period. Why such kind of questions are being asked actually? Definitely there are some, actually some change in the historiography for last 30 years. Definitely this subaltern historiography is coming out somewhere around 1990. But now the UPSC has started following that particular pattern. Subaltern. A subaltern, simply you can say that those sections of the society which were actually neglected in history, right? These people are trying to write down the history of those sections, like women. Now it's not necessary that the women of the poor class or the proletariat class. The women from the elite class also part of the subaltern category, right? So these kind of areas, that is what actually I'm trying to discuss. Right. So this subaltern category, this is very important. And suppose, definitely, as I told you guys might have gone through the book of Bipin Chandra. So you can see the Bipin Chandra's, the pro-vision of Bipin Chandra towards Congress. No, they might be similar also. Leftist, and what is this leftist historiography? No, this is not the leftist historiography. Economy based, historical materialism. I mean, the whole society, they are trying to see the society with the vision or with the glass of historical materialism or materialism, right? That every change, as I told you, what is history actually? It is not just the record of events. History is basically to analyze the changes, right? And once you are analyzing the changes, then you have to understand what should be the right way of analyzing. That I'll come on, right? So let us first discuss the political. So definitely you know about Akbar, right? Akbar have done many conquests, right? But these kind of things are not unnecessary, not important. So what is important for you? Now the first thing which is important for you, that is the kingship theories, right? And then administration. Now the administration could be of two forms. What are these? Centralized and decentralized. One is revenue administration, right? And the another is judicial administration, right? Because here, as far as this administration is concerned, so these two form of administrations are very important. So that is the another zone. Then what about? Look, military administration. I mean, have you ever heard any particular term like military administration? You definitely have gone through a couple of books in medieval India or ancient India. Have you ever heard this term, military administration? This is not the administration, right? Once we use this term administration, so definitely it is implemented over the subject population, right? So what kind of steps or policies have been taken by the state, just for the sake of the subject population? This is the part of administration. What next? What should be next? In polity, what you are supposed to study, apart from this kingship and administration? That is coming in, that you can say, what you are saying. Nature of the state. So these three, apart from that, there are certain policies, it depends up to the eras. Policies, different policies, like they are asking such questions like Mongol policy, right? Or it might be different for the ancient India, it might be different for the medieval India. So some policies, these are specific, right? I mean, suppose we are discussing about Mauryan Mauryan era, then definitely the questions might be different. For the medieval era, the questions might be different. So these policies, some of the policies, so as far as this political aspect of the society is concerned, so these are the areas you are supposed to focus upon, right? Now come to the economy. So in what way you can categorize the economy? Rural and so these are the categories, right? Now in rural, what you are supposed to study? Pastoral or agrarian economy. Basically agrarian, right? Because normally they are not asking questions on the pastoral, this animal husbandry or this pastoralism, right? So agrarian. So now in this agrarian economy, what you are supposed to focus upon? There might be some factual details, right? What they used to cultivate and these kind of things are there, but normally they are not asking such kind of questions. So what you are supposed to focus upon actually? Nature of land ownership. Very good. Yes, land ownership. This is one aspect. Then you can say the agrarian relation, right? The agrarian relation between the revenue collector and the peasantry community. So these are the two specific areas where you are supposed to focus upon, right? And then urban. So in urban, what you are supposed to study? Different crafts. So the first is, one of the important topic, that is the urbanization itself. And as you can see, for last few years, they are asking questions on the urbanization, right? And why they have started asking so many questions on urbanization? Because what is happening actually, urbanization is such a theme, and you can see the new NCERT as well. In the new NCERT, there was one specific topic with the name of urbanization, right? Why urbanization? Because recently many researches have been done on urbanization, and that is where they have started asking such kind of questions. And now last year in the general studies also they have asked a questions on the IVC and urbanization, right? So this urbanization, and then definitely different crafts, right? And what kind of different crafts are there? And there may be many related issues related to craft, like guild, one of the important aspect of the urban life. So these kind of things are important in the urban IA. Then another thing is taxation system. What kind of taxation system was there? Tariffs specifically, right? And the most important, what was the role of state in the economy? That is very important. Now here you can see the policies, right? Here you are saying this trade and commerce, right? In as far as trade and commerce is concerned, so there should be two forms of trade and commerce. One was inland trade and another was external trade, right? So these are the inland and the external trade. So these are the specific areas in this economy, right? So here, if you are reading something, so you must be conscious while you are coming to such kind of details. Then you must be conscious. Yes, there are chances of questions. I mean, questions could can be asked from this particular segment, right? So this is the economy. Then come to the social. Now, as far as this social is concerned, so here this subaltern historiography is becoming very important. Now, subaltern, as I told you, it might be woman. So woman is one category. So definitely the status of women is one of the important aspects, right? Apart from that, caste system, social stratification, Varna system, yes, social, one of the important aspects of history, social mobility, right? Because the caste system and Varna system, as we perceive this caste system and Varna system, that is not the actual reality. And last few years they have asked questions like, I don't remember the exact questions, but they have asked in a way, the caste system as it has been mentioned in the Vedic, literature, it was not followed actually in the same way. This was the crux of the question, right? Okay. So you just see the question, it was the same. The crux of the question was, the moral of the question was the same actually, right? So what should be the right answer for that? Simply the question was asking, the demand of the question was that The caste system, as it has been mentioned in the Vedic scripture, actually it was not followed in the same way in the society. Sorry, I am not getting you. Social mobility, right? Do you have any example for social mobility? Mauryas. Mauryas were Sudras. Right. And simply I am telling you one word, one sentence, that not a single ruler in India was actually belonging to this Kshatriya community. Can you take name of anyone, right? That either you take the name of Gupta or this Mauryans, or you can talk about this Nanda dynasty, or you discuss about this Sung, Kanva, Satvahana dynasty, or you discuss the northwestern dynasties like Kusanas, Sakas, Parthians, these kind of dynasties. I mean, were they Kshatriyas? No, they were not Kshatriyas, right? So the caste system is Varna system, whatever is indicating for the Kshatriyas are supposed to. What was the actual duty of the Kshatriya? Securing the territory. Is it the right definition for the work of, I mean, in the same way it was defined in the Vedic scriptures? Sorry? Simply in one line you can, the first and the foremost important task for the Kshatriya community was to maintain the social order. Not, these kind of things you are saying. Right? So these kind of clarity should be there. I mean, why these people are asking questions like on the basis of sources. They are asking the questions in this way. On the basis of sources you define any particular thing. Right? So in the sources, I mean in the Vedic scripture, what have been written? To maintain the social order, the Kshatriya community, it was the most important target or important task for them to maintain the social order. And that is why you can see, suppose I am asking a question to you, why this Bhakti movement is coming later on, much later after this South India. Bhakti movement is coming in South India at what century? 7th, 8th century. This Vaishnavism and Saivism, right? And then Shankaracharya and some other people are coming. But this Bhakti movement is coming in the into the North India much later on, 14th, 15th century. And before that, we will just find very few Bhakti movements like in the northwestern part, Nathpanthis, right? Or we can find in the Bengal Tantrism, right? People like Jaydev and some other people are coming, right? So why this Bhakti movement is coming much later on, and that too in the some parts like Bengal and Sindh area. Why not it's coming in the main part of this India, northern UP, North India. Look, Rajputs were also became Rajput or Kshatriya just because of this social mobility. Rajputs were not Kshatriyas, right? And as Rajputs are very much obliged to the Brahminic people. Why? Because they were brought in this community, Kshatriya community, just because of the reason, just because of this Brahminic people, right? So these people were very much obliged to them, and that is where they were just trying to maintain this social order perfectly in the North India, and they never allowed such kind of Bhakti movements in the Northern India. Once Rajput declined, right, and then this medieval empires are coming, and these people hardly intervened in the social system, then these people, then we can see this Bhakti movement in the North India, right? So in society, I was just discussing about the society. So definitely you can understand the status of women. It's very important topic. Right? Apart from that, any depressed class you can take the name. Right? Simply you can say the subaltern class, or simply you can say the proletariats. Right? I hope all of you understand this proletariats, right? So the proletariat, no, you don't understand proletariats. This is your first means. Okay. With history first means. And last year you have written with?
My last attempt was in 2011. All I appeared in my attempts were
Oh, just because of 2011 you got this attempt. Okay, fine. So why did you choose then history?
Puppet was risky.
Puppet was risky. Yes, Puppet was risky. It's a very simple answer. The same answer you can give in the interview board also. That you people have done very bad with Puppet. right? Knowingly you, desperately you, what you did actually, you discouraged this paper, public administration, and that is why I have choose history. Right. Anyways, so status of women, what, I was discussing about proletariats. Proletariats, the people like me. Huh? Is proletariat. Proletariat. So proletariat is the word actually, it was for, actually according to Marx there are two sections in the society, elite or the bourgeois and the proletariat. So bourgeois who have, exactly, who has controlled this means of production or who has controlled the surplus of the society, and those who are deprived of the surplus, these are the proletariats. That is why I said people like us, right? Right. Anyways, so this proletariat. So status of women is the part, proletariat is the part, right? And definitely then, and this is why, I mean, that is why these people are asking questions like, describe the life of a common man during Gupta period. So now you cannot find the specific information on these kind of words. Why? Because there were no source to write down, or there is no source actually to construct the history of the proletariat. So that is why this question may be asked also, I guess, the Jatkas, the use of Jatkas as a source of proletariat, as a source of the history of proletariat. Why? Because Jatka is in, if you'll see the ancient India, right, and if you can see the questions, I have given some questions to you. Ravi, एक वो sheet देना आपको, paper, वो paper जो है. There's a question, yes, the first question only. Literary works of ancient India constitutes a complex representation of the society and a refracted image of the past, right? Actually, the most problematic area in this particular thing, in this particular question, or in this particular, sources, is all the literatures were finally compiled or composed by Brahmanic people. And Brahmanic, this Brahmanic people or the Brahmins were actually the dominant section of the society, right? And as these were the dominant section of the society, so obviously they are seeing the society. एक ही चाहिए, वो नहीं हमको. ठीक, you just take this. Dominant sections of the society. So whatever the literary, works are there, obviously these were, we can say top-down view, right? They were just seeing the society from the top. So definitely whatever, the way these people were trying to exploit the peasantry community or some other communities like Vaisya community, right? So it was justified by them, right? So that is why we don't find the history of the common man. But yes, Jatka, what is the use of the Jatkas? Jatkas are the basically folk stories, right? So as far as, these were the folk stories, so it's very easy to construct the history of the proletariats from these Jatkas. That is the best use of Jatkas, and that is why this is considered to be one of the best source for history, basically for this proletariats, right? Anyways, so this is the society. Now come to the religion. Yes.
In addition to Brahmanical literature, Buddhist literature, which are orthodox philosophy, might also give you another insight into the
No, actually not. Even the Buddhist literatures were also compiled by the Sramans were.
liberal Brahmins.
These were also Brahmins, right? It's very simple. The education system was not very strong in that particular time. So only the higher class was entitled for education, right? So definitely those people who are writing the books, these people were very simply, representing this bourgeois, not the elite class, not the proletariats. So definitely either you talk about Buddhist or Jaina literature or any other literature, right, till the Gupta period. So you're getting such kind of thing, right? So this is all about the society, right? So these kind of things, basically here you are supposed to cover these kind of areas, right? Suppose you are seeing the urban society or the rural society, definitely the status of the woman or the status of the depressed class, these kind of things are important, right? The next topic is religion. So what you are supposed to cover in the religion actually? What is important in the religion? Yes, very good. Religion is such a topic that you cannot see in a segregation with polity, economy, society, right? I mean, religion is such a thing which is deeply, I mean, we can say it was deeply mixed with the, these kind of aspects of the societies. So, just in a alienated form, you cannot see the religion, because religion is very much deeply connected to this, connected to the society, and that is why see the religion with the, society, and that is why these, questions are being asked, like, in what ways we can implement the theories of Buddhism, right? To sort out the disputes in the of the present days. So that is why this, always try to see the philosophies rather than, some other details of any particular religion. And the religious development, as you know, there was much development like Buddhism, Jainism and Brahmanism. These kind of things are there. So basically see the philosophical part, and from there these people are, raising questions like, last year they asked questions on the Upanishads, right? So it was the apex Vedantic philosophy. Just you are supposed to write about the Vedantic philosophy, in what way it was the extreme of the philosophy which we have already seen in the Vedic scriptures, right? So this is the part, religion you are supposed to cover, and art and culture, that is very clear. Some of the, either it is architecture or painting or cave painting, so these kind of things are there. So at least you have to cover, rather than collecting the factual details, you have to understand what kind of new innovations were there. That is important, right? So this new innovations are important, rather than you are just remembering the facts of this art and architecture. So this is all about history, and that is what you are supposed to cover actually, right? So if you are reading any particular book, so try to find such kind of details in the books, rather than reading it without implementing your mind, right? Now the second section, this is what to write, and the next section is how to write, right? So can anybody suggest what should be the better way to write the answers in present scenario? Which view? Holistic view. And what is the holistic view in history? Nobody can know the holistic view in history. Look, the first thing you must be very clear about the, the historiography. Do you guys have any idea of historiography? Definitely you have gone through, if you have started, studying the history. So definitely you are having some idea of history, actually history writing. The art of history writing, this is known as historiography. So there are some historiographies in India, right? So what kind of historiographies are there? Nationalist. Before that, before the nationalist, the imperialist group was there. After the imperialist, the nationalists are coming, and then the Marxist people are coming, and then subalterns are coming, and there are some more schools like Cambridge School is there, right? Cambridge School. Right. So these kind of groups are there. These are known as the school of historiography, right? So one thing you must, clearly understand, in what ways the questions are being asked. Are they emphasizing on the nationalism or the nationalist group of historiography, or imperialist group of historiography, or Marxist or subaltern? That is very, necessary to understand. If you don't understand the nature of the question, you cannot attempt the questions, in a right way. Who has said that?
There was one faculty in Hyderabad who says so. He got very good score in UPSC. He said that UPSC, for example, take the question on Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb is a misunderstood monarch. So UPSC has this attitude of
Look, UPSC is nothing actually, right? The questions are being framed by the professors of different colleges or the universities, like JNU, like DU, Jamia, right? Some other people from Hyderabad Central University. So people are coming from, a board was constructed, and people are coming from different areas, and these people are, framing the questions of history, right? So now the second thing, that definitely most of the people are biased towards this leftist. Actually, this is not the leftist historiography. Don't use this particular term repeatedly. Even I have started using this term. It's Marxist historiography, not the leftist, right? So this is the Marxist historiography. So definitely people are biased for them, but you cannot implement, universally in all the questions, the historiography. If it, it was true, then why people would have been reading this Bipin Chandra? Bipin Chandra is not a pure Marxist historian, right? Definitely he has said like Marxist nationalist historian. Right? So there, suppose if you are writing the answers in the modern India, and you have been asked the questions about deindustrialization or the commercialization of the agriculture, so what you are supposed to write? Will you deny that or will you accept that? Bipin Chandra? Exactly, the Cambridge is denying actually. The Cambridge school has started denying this particular fact that there was a kind of deindustrialization in India. People like Morris J. Morris and some other, right? But Bipin Chandra and basically the nationalists and as well as Marxists as well, these people are accepting the idea that yes, there was a kind of deindustrialization. But recently some schools have started denying, and yes, there are some reality also there. And as these people have started denying such kind of thing, but you are not supposed to deny this particular fact, and you are supposed to write yes, there was a kind of deindustrialization. So that is why I'm saying you that you have to understand the nature of the questions. If you don't understand the nature of the question, so you cannot write the answer, okay? Because there is a demand of the question, right? So let us discuss one by one. The first thing in your answer, basically in your answer, what should be there, that you might have noticed one thing, that people have started emphasizing on the sources, right? So, you can see many questions are being asked on the basis of sources, basically in the paper first. Why so? No, sources have only single interpretation. People have interpreted it differently. Sorry, repeat it again. Exactly. The first thing, nothing is fixed in history, right? There is no final conclusion. And actually, suppose I am writing the history with this Marxist perspective, right? And suppose he is writing the history with this nationalist perspective. So it does not mean that she is wrong, I am right, or she is right, I am wrong. Are you getting the point? So everything is right. What is true actually? These are the sources. Are you getting the point? And that is why they have changed the nature of the questions. Earlier, suppose D.N. Jha or R.S. Sharma, whatever they have written, these kind of write-ups were considered as perfect history. But this is not reality. Basically, history is a kind of debate, right? And maybe, we can have different views on the decline of IVC, or we might have different views on the, decline of Mauryan Empire. Right. So all the views could be right. I cannot deny it completely that no, whatever he is saying or she is saying, that is completely wrong, and whatever I am saying, that is right. No, nobody can claim like that. And that is what is happening, that whatever sources are there, we are trying to analyze with the sources only. Right. So in some of the questions they have already indicated you on the basis of sources. So there you are supposed to write the names of the sources. If you don't remember the source, at least you can write in a way on the basis of this archaeological source or on the basis of literary source. In that way you can write. So whenever you study anything, just try to focus or emphasize on the sources. Suppose you are reading the Satavahana period, then you must know one thing: this copper plates are very important for the Satavahana period, right? There for this particular section you don't need to remember any extra thing or something like that. So whenever you are writing your answers, basically in the ancient and the medieval India, you just try to mention some of the sources. Even though they have not asked about sources, try to mention about the sources, right? From this particular source, right? Suppose you are reading about Akbar. So definitely two historians are there during the period of Akbar. These were Abul Fazl, and Abul Fazl was pro-Akbar, and Badayuni was anti-Akbar, right? And he has actually made a list of bad works of Akbar, right? And the same works have been included by Abul Fazl as good works, right? So here we are getting a kind of counter view of Akbar, right? So it's easy to study about Akbar, but this is not true for all the events of history, basically specifically in ancient and medieval one, right? So at least you just remember the sources and begin your answers with the sources. Okay, from this particular source I can write in this. I know this, right? And don't try to conclude anything, because there was no conclusion in history. And actually, the particular format of questions have ended this problem, because they have stopped asking such kind of questions where you are supposed to give or you are supposed to conclude the things, right? They are asking small questions, 10 markers or 15 markers, maximum 20 markers, and you are not supposed to conclude it until and unless they are asking for the conclusion. Don't conclude it, right? So basically, start your answers with the sources. Then the second thing, try to understand the nature of the questions. I mean, has it been asked with this Marxist perspective or the, I mean to say this subaltern perspective, or it has been asked in with, this nationalist perspective? So this is very important to understand. So just try to answer the questions with the, just by understanding the perspective. So this is very important, right? The another thing, what should be the word limit of the question? What should be the ideal word limit of the, suppose there is a 15 mark questions. So what should be the ideal word limit? Who told you? Huh? 100 words.
60 marker usually 600 words is
So, I mean, you want to say that UP don't know, UPSC don't know the calculations, and that is why they have left this particular section? I mean, for the 10 markers, they are asking how many words? 150, right? But UPSC is, specialized pretty enough to say that if 10 markers, they are asking 150 words. So at 15 markers, it's somewhere around 250 or 225, right? It should be like that. But actually, this is a wrong concept. UPSC is not mentioning any word limit with the question, right? There should be some logic for that, right? They are not, they are just, feeling there is no need. I mean, of course, the people can calculate and they can, calculate the words, this much words should be there. If they are leaving this particular section, it means that there is some logic. What is the logic? The first thing, your first and fifth questions are evaluated first, that you know. Always your question number first and question number fifth has been evaluated, right? And then 2, 3, 4 and then 6, 7, 8 in the optional. That you know or not? पता है ना? ये पता नहीं है. Always question number first and fifth, were evaluated first, and then they move for some other questions. Why? Because question number, just by seeing the question number first and fifth, they frame their mind about your label, right? And that is where the word limits are there. Okay, you are not supposed to write as much as you want, because they have to check it perfectly. They have to read it completely, and then they have to frame their mind. Okay, there should be I mean to say, what is the label of the student, and then they go for the next of the year. And in rest of the questions, the word limit is not there, because every question has a demand, right? If suppose it's a 15 marking questions, it's a 15 marking question. If the content is around 500 words, you can write it in 500 words. Just try to write in 500 words. And if you have the content of only 50 words of 15 marking questions, finish it in 50 words only. If you think that in 50 words you are finishing all the content of the question, just finish it. There is no problem in that. You are getting equal marks, rather than writing some bullshit in the answer set, right? That is a 15 marking questions. The word limit must be somewhere around 250. So I have to make it of 200. I mean I have to make it of 250 words, right? So always, whatever the content you have, just write down the content and leave it. There's no need to increase it or decrease it, the word limits, right? The word limits are there only in the first number and the fifth number. So just follow the instructions there only. UPSC is equipped enough to tell you that if there should be any word limit in 15 markers or 20 markers, they would have written down, right? They are not writing, because they are just leaving up to you that what is the demand of the questions, whatever the contents are there, we just write down the content and leave it. So what my suggestion is that don't try to write anything which is not necessary. Simply you write whatever the content is there in your mind. It might be possible that you are having less content, there might be some more content, but you are not knowing it. So just try to write only 50 words on that. If you are writing 150 words, right, so you are getting one less number rather than one more number, right? So if you have having the content of 50 words, so finish it in 50 words. That is a different thing, right? That is a different thing. I'm just discussing about the nature of the question, right? And now you have to calculate definitely if you are having less time, because right now at least you are supposed to write how many questions? 5, 10 and 9. At least 19 questions you are supposed to write down, right? So definitely you have to manage your time. So what my suggestion is that the simply hit in the bullseye. Whatever is asked to you, just try to write down that. Earlier what was happening, there were 60 marker questions. So there was a introduction, then there was a body part, then there was a conclusion. This was the ideal format of answer writing. But right now there is no need to follow such kind of such kind of answer writing. Simply whatever is being asked to you, write down. Right. So this is the strategy which you are must supposed to follow in the paper first. Now come to the paper second. Right. Yes, you can write in bullets also. I am coming on that. In what way you are supposed to write. The next, I was discussing what paper one. Yes, sorry, I just missed to discuss about the mapping section. In what way, the first thing, in what way you are supposed to prepare the mapping section? Exactly. They have changed the nature of this question also. So just do one thing. Look, I have given you the map. This is the same map which is given to you by UPSC. Right? The same map. Now what you are supposed to do, there are some latitudes and longitudes have been notified here. Right? You just do one thing. I have given you one more map. Can I please? Thank you. So now you just do one thing. You connect all the latitudes and longitudes, and in between you make you draw some more lines. Right? Suppose there is 70 degree, and I don't remember, it's I guess 74 or something like that. So you just draw, you have drawn these two lines, and in between you draw one more line. Right? The lines have already been drawn. So this is the ideal map. Right? And now just do one thing. From wherever you are practicing this map, do the same practice over there. Right? And now it is very easy to remember the sites. So that should be the right way for this mapping section. You just keep this map, that is why I have given you this map, and now just get some copies of this map and practice on that. Right? So whenever you are getting this map in the examination, you draw these lines only. And you are not supposed to, waste much time, because these latitudes have been given, and you are just supposed to connect the lines. Right? And now there is a kind of graph which is which is available to you, and now prepare the sites with this particular graph actually, and that it would be easier for you to recollect the sites or remind the sites. So that is why you just prepare the sites in this way. That is my suggestion. Otherwise, earlier they used to suggest the rivers. Right? Very earlier. Later on they have stopped asking completely this particular thing. Right? So now there is no hint apart from this. So you just follow these instructions and prepare these maps with this way only. Half marks for the site. If you have identified the site perfectly, then half marks for that, and rest of the marks for the description of the site. Right? So if you are not capable of identifying the marks perfectly, this is actually cheating what I am telling you. But if you are not capable of identifying the site perfectly, then at least write the features of that site. Are you getting the point? Suppose it's a chalcolithic site, right? So obviously the features might be very similar of the chalcolithic sites. So write something on this chalcolithic site, right? Without writing the name. Yes. Without writing the name, you just write down some of the features of the chalcolithic site.Maybe you are getting half or 1/4, but at least you might be getting something rather than.
What about the sites which are very much close to the related?
Which are minimum?
Which are very much close to.
Look, there is no solution for that, right? If you are asking these questions, just try to find the certain things first. What is the certain things? Like they are asking the port cities, right? There should not be any doubt in the port cities. They are asking the cities, or they are asking the sites related to the Buddhism or Jainism or pilgrimage site. In that way they are asking, right? So you just try to at least complete your preparation on those sites first, right? Because there it's very easy to identify the sites, and it is very, very obviously such sites are coming also. What are the problematic areas? Like suppose if they are asking the Neolithic site in the South India, right? So basically these are the problematic sections. Definitely, they might be asking one or two sites from there, or some sites from the North India. Basically this UP area, right? There some sites are complicated. So you are not supposed to. Earlier people used to score around 50, even 55 also in this out of 60. But now it's very tough to secure that much score. But at least even in this pattern, you can secure somewhere around 30 to 35, and this is a good score actually, right? Are you asking something? No. So this is the strategy for the paper 1 that you are supposed to write in the same way you are supposed to write. Now come to the paper 2. You want to ask something on paper 1, any kind of query is there, you can ask.
For valuation in ancient India, for example, if you are writing on the major objects, art and architecture of Mauryan period, drawing it of India map, trying to show the places where they are located. Will it help in schooling?
I mean, you're not
in geography, but that help.
in geography. It's there are much use of such kind of maps and figures, but in history there is no much use of such kind of maps and figures, because you are just wasting your time, right? If any particular or any specific question there is a kind of requirement, then only you can draw such kind of things. Otherwise there is not. And actually it's a kind of the thing you are trying to make. This is a kind of factual details you are providing to him, and means is not the examination of the factual details you are having. Suppose in what kind of figures you can make. Suppose they are asking something about the Asokan pillars, then suppose you are making in this way you are making something and you are indicating something. Or suppose they are asking about stupas, that what kind of constructions are there for the stupas, or like what kind of ideological concepts are there for the stupas, then it is important. Like what kind in what way these people are trying to indicate about the cosmic order, right? The main concern, the philosophical concern of the stupa, right? So there you can draw such kind of lines. Otherwise it's not important. Try to avoid such kind of things where you can easily make him understand something, right? That is there, it should be important. So in paper 2, definitely the nature of the paper 2, all the statements are being asked in the paper 2, right? So as far as all the statements are concerned, so basically these statements are given by the historians, right? And now here this historiography is very important, that you have to understand, right? So now suppose any statement might be given by any nationalist historian, and then they are asking critically analyze, right? So there you are supposed to write to understand the nature of the question first. You are not it's not important to know that who has given this particular statement, but at least you must understand, and what is most important, that context of the statement, right? There's no need to write down that he has given a statement, and at least try to understand the statement has been given on permanent settlement or any cabinet mission. These kind of things you have to understand. And the second part, that is very important, content, right? Definitely the statement is having a kind of content that you have to understand, right? And the third thing is perspectives, right? So whenever any statement has been given, just try to find out these 3 things. You might have gone through the book of Bipin Chandra, right? So this book, as I told you, has been written with this basically with this nationalist perspective, right? But if you are reading the book of Sumit Sarkar or Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, the book has been written with this subaltern perspective, right? So there you can identify such kind of things. What kind of is this statement has been picked or has been given by any particular historian, but the sense is being carried with the statement is nationalist or Marxist or subaltern or such kind of thing. Just this is the context that you have to understand. And then the content is completely depending up to your study, that whatever the books you have studied, so the content is from there only, right? So here I would like to suggest the book of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, From Palasi to Partition, one of the very important book. People who are writing this means they must go for this book, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay. Sorry, complete book. because here you are getting the actual perspective for the mains examination, right? Bipin Chandra is not no more useful, right? So these things, and finally the perspective. Perspective means what kind of different interpretations would be there of this this statement, right? So this is the kind of brief discussion, the way you are supposed to write down the answers in the question, and there are some questions, right? And we can discuss some of the questions, and according to that, at least we can understand the nature of the questions. Sorry, fourth, world history. World history. Okay. World history is being discussed by one of the another teacher, K. Nasir sir. He'll come after me, right? So you have seen the questions. If you want to discuss any particular question, you please. Literary works in ancient India constitutes a complex representation of the society and a reflected image of the past.
Not very clear.
It's reflected. What is reflected? Something vague, right? So why something vague? I mean, why these literary sources are presenting a vague idea? Because as I told you, this is not the actual view of the history or actual view of the society, right? Because it's a kind of, the actual history is not possible, that is true, but at least we can try to reach as much as nearer possible for us to to the actuality, we can say, or the objective history, you can say, right? But what is the problem actually? That just because of the sources, basically the literary sources, it's very tough to say, because literary sources is such a thing. You can discuss, you can take any example. Suppose one thing I have already discussed about the top down view, right? That if you are writing the history just by seeing, just by sitting in an AC room, air conditioned room, then definitely the the world should be you can perceive the world as very cool or something like that, but if you're writing the history just by sitting on the road, so world might be different for you. So that is what actually I'm trying to tell you. But apart from that, there are some more problems are also there with this literary sources, because as you know about Megasthenes, Indica, right? And all of you must be knowing that Indica is not available to us, right? Indica has been picked as reference books or used as reference book by some contemporary writers like Plutarch, like Strabo, Arian, right? These kind of writers. So we have just collected the those segments, and we have compiled it as Indica. Or we can discuss about Arthashastra. Out of 15 Adhikarnas, only 7 or 8 Adhikarnas might have been written by Kautilya, right? And rest of the volumes have been written by somebody else, right? So now, or you can see about this Mahabharata, right? Mahabharata has been written many times, right? So definitely, it has, people have started writing, they have begin the writing of history, writing Mahabharata somewhere around 10th century BC, and they finished it 10th century AD, right? So it has traveled around 2000 years, right? So this 2000 years, society has seen completely different kind of system, right? So these different systems have been represented there. Now it's very tough to bring out the actual reality or the actual history from there. So that is why it was always presenting the reflected image, not the actual image, right? Any other question? Just see the questions. Second one. It's a very simple question. The emergence of numbers of new religions and sects in the 6th century BC could be rightly interpreted on economic grounds as compared to the religious ground critically analyzed. Look, normally people say that Buddhism and Jainism are coming out just because some other sects are also there. They're just coming out because numbers of problems were there in Brahmanism, right? But this is right. I'm not denying that completely. But this is not complete explanation and complete interpretation also. It's very simply that why these people have emphasized a lot on the non-violence. Buddhism, Jainism, or these sects actually. Why they have emphasized a lot on non-violence?
Vedic religion, the result of Vedic religion comes agriculture getting affected, trading economy getting affected.
Exactly. Ultimately, they had to create the surplus, because now the society has shifted to lower Gangetic plains, and there they are capable of producing the surplus. And there are some more reasons. The plowshare could not be pulled by man, right? Now it must be pulled by bullock, and the bullocks were sacrificed, right? So it was problematic. The same we can implement, the same idea we can implement for the trade and commerce also. This was the period which is known as the second urbanization, right? And the second urbanization, if you are discussing about urbanization, so it's very much obvious. Then the bullocks are very much, very important. Why? Because for carrying the items or the goods, you need the bullocks, right? So that is why these people have emphasized a lot on the, economy. On non-violence, right? And in the same way you can interpret, because suppose you are seeing the society or a urban economy. So in the urban economy, there is very useful role of usury system or the banking system, right? Money lending, right? But normally, Brahmanism always discourage this money lending. सीधा बोलते सूद का पैसा खाओगे तो कहाँ जाओगे? नरक में जाओगे. But you cannot run your business without taking the money as loan, right? Definitely, Reliance must be having huge amount of loan. Mukesh Ambani and Anil Ambani, right? But they are the biggest entrepreneurs of India, right? So money lending was an important inherent feature of economy, urban economy, and these people discourage this particular phenomenon. And that is why what Buddhism did. Buddhism told that if you are a debtor, right? Suppose you have taken the loan and you are not in a condition to repay the loan, so you cannot flee from there. If you are joining the Sangha, people normally doing so. They were doing so. They have taken the loan. Now they are not in a condition to repay the loan. So they joined the Sangha, became a Sraman. Right? They are saying, if you want to join the Sraman, you have to repay the loan first and then only you can join the Sangha. So there are many reasons. There were many ways we can say it was not only a religious movement, but it was a kind of economic movement. Right? It was somehow supporting the creation of surplus. And the surplus was the backbone of the society. Kind of, one point is definitely there, because the emergence of Buddhism is very much dependent on the trade and commerce, or we can say the growth of because there was a very this questions may be asked to you also. There was a very close linkage between the mercantilist communities and the Buddhist monks, because normally the Buddhist monk used to travel with this mercantilist communities, and the Buddhism spread to different areas just because of this mercantilist communities. And apart from that, definitely these people patronized them, because most of the fundings they were getting from this mercantilist communities, right? So this is the crux of the answer, right? Next. Yes. Look, it was not these kind of, this is not the revolution. Revolution was something which was there in the idea, right? Look, Advaita, non-dualistic philosophy was already there, right? Vedantic philosophy you must be knowing, where people have emphasized on bhakti and some other thing, right? But here this people is getting, he's coming up with an idea, that feeling of oneness, then the God, it's not God, sorry, it's Brahman, and you could be same, right? So this was a kind of revolution in the, Brahmanism actually. Right? Non-dualism. So it was such an idea that people have never, thought actually. Are you getting the point? So this idea was the revolution. Otherwise, Vaishnavism is not the revolution. Vaishnavism was such a thing which we have already seen. Panchratra concept we have already seen, right? And then people used to worship the Gupta people. They used to also worship this. So Vaishnavism was already there, but the kind of idea that he is coming up. Coming up with the idea. That idea is very important, right? Next.
So the seventh one is very specific.
That is very important. Suppose you are asked these questions: what was the status of women in the Mughal agrarian society? Then, in what way you are supposed to write the answer? Is Mughal agrarian society? So Mughal agrarian society, so definitely it's indicating about the proletariat woman, not the upper class woman, right? Agrarian society, the Jamindar is not the part of this agrarian society.
So the women from the rural areas, they have more liberty than the women in urban areas as part of the rural community.
Anybody else? Look, the question must be, categorized first in two categories. First, the Hindu Muslim and the Muslim woman. The Hindu woman and the Muslim woman, right? And then you write, because the status of the Hindu woman was slightly different from the status of the Muslim woman. So deal with Hindu woman first, you can deal with Muslim woman first also. So deal separately. Right? So these kind of ideas must be there. See the question, read the questions at least for 3 times, 4 times, then only try for the question. Right? So first write about the Hindu woman. Okay, this was they were peasantry community, and what kind of systems were there, sati, vati, these kind of things. Their access to the education, these kind of things you are supposed to write. Parda system, sati system, the status of the widows, these kind of system, and the same things with the Muslim woman. So there should be 2 sections in this particular question, right? Next,
changes in the economy from 4th century AD to 7th century AD.
it's a very simple question. It's basically covering the Gupta period and the post-Gupta period. So basically, it's a debate. It's a debate, right? Because some of the people are saying that actually this is a decline of the economy in this particular period. And what was the reason? So basically, what is the debate? Somebody, some of the people, some of the historians are saying yes, there was a decline. What are the basis for that? These people are saying now we cannot find the proper coinage system, right? Because we find only the high value currency, and high value currency is always indicating about the declining trade, not the increased trade. Why? Because it is always used by the elite communities, not the proletariat communities. So it is indicating about the decline of trade and commerce. It might be possible that this is only being used by the elite communities, right? So mainly the feudal society has been using it. They are using it, right? The another thing is that apart from that, the feudal society is there, and feudal society is always promoting the stagnant society, right? So this stagnancy is there because feudal society is the agriculturist community, right, or agriculturist society. So here only the agricultures have been promoted, right? And as if you'll promote the agriculture, then definitely you are discouraging the money economy. Then again this barter system and such systems are coming, right? But there was one more view, and that particular view is saying that actually there was much external trade which was being conducted in this particular period, right? They are tracing the relationship with Maldives, Malaysia and Southeast Asian country, Byzantine Empire, right?
The Roman Empire came in 5th and 15th century. There was Byzantine Empire, which could consider that.
Yes, there was some trade, definitely some trade, but this is not, the Byzantine trade is not very much dominant in this particular period. But apart from that, we can find some relationship with Southeast Asia, China, and then Malaysia, Maldives, these kind of countries. And I can just tell you one example, that these people used to import the cowries also. Do you understand cowries, right? And the cowries were used as currency in that particular time, right? So now these people, through giving such kind of examples, these people are not ready to accept that there was a kind of decline in the trade.
Archaeological excavations have shown
There are many reasons.
during that period emerging for the first time.
Harappan centers in Gupta period,
Urban centers.
urban centers. Yes, some of the people are saying so also. I just told you, until and unless they ask for you conclusion, don't write the conclusion. Leave it as it is. These are the different views, and this is the analysis in history, right? Until and unless they are asking to you for the conclusion, don't write. Cultural? No, here you are not supposed, simply it's asking about the economy, right? So you are not supposed to write about the cultural aspect. This is unnecessary, right? Anything else? So that's all about, right?
This is the third question. Interpretation of early Indian history that experienced very significant changes over time. Does that mean numismatic?
This is a very basic and conceptual question. You must understand. The same thing we have discussed couple of times, because this is a kind of journey of Indian history. It was started from the imperialist group of historiography, then nationalist, then Marxist, then Marxist, then subaltern, then Cambridge School, right? So this is this, I mean, this particular journey has to be written here.
Those four kinds of historiography has to be discussed.
Exactly, yes.
So is it advisable to attempt the question kind of
If you have don't choice, then what, I mean, beggars are not choosers actually.
Sir,
because if one particular question is there, suppose the status of government if I have vague idea,
Hmm.
is it advisable to attempt it? Will they give marks on superficial knowledge?
I mean, in history there is nothing superficial knowledge, right? You have gone through the history. You might have read this Satish Chandra. Definitely. So at least you are having a vague idea. There was a sati system, there was pada system, there was what kind of access to the education was there. You might be having that, you are not having any concrete idea, but vague idea is definitely there. And if you are, definitely don't leave any particular question, because at least you are having some idea. Suppose some technical questions are, asking in that way, we cannot say anything, right? But if any such kind of questions, based upon society, definitely some ideas there. Yes, you write down. Even suppose the questions are being asked like Lekha Paddhati, right? They have asked last year, I guess, about Lekha Paddhati. So such kind of questions also should be attempted. In what? Lekha Paddhati in Gujarat, in the medieval period. Now at least try to think, even though you don't know anything, that Lekha Paddhati, Gujarat, and that too in the medieval period. So as you know, this particular coastal area, the western coastal area, is became one of the prominent zone for the trade in the medieval period. This Badauch and Sopara, these kind of centers, right? So Lekha Paddhati is very clear by its name only. Ki Lekha Paddhati, what should be, Lekha Paddhati? Definitely the recordings, the records of trade and commerce and such kind of thing. So at least we are having some idea. Try to implement such kind of idea if it is necessary to write down that question. Because if in two of the questions you are very good and the third is problematic, then you can try, you attempt this. But instead of writing so much long, because some people are having much potential, without knowing anything they could write several pages, I know, and specifically in history, right? But don't try for that. Yes, whatever the specific things you can find, okay, this should be, just write down that, leave it.
sir, regarding the third question apart from four kinds of historiography,
Hmm.
numismatics, epigraphy,
No, these kind of things are no. This is this history based upon the sources. That is a different thing.
actually in the book by Romila Thapa,
Hmm.
it says that in the light of recent evidence,
Hmm.
the interpretation of early ancient India has changed.
Yes, it not has been changed only. It's continuously is changing.
So why not then numismatics and epigraphy?
No, actually, this is not the demand of this question. That is a different thing. That is if they are asking something on the sources, right? Then only you can discuss some such kind of things. Otherwise, there is no need to discuss it.
Interpretation of early Indian history had experienced very significant changes over time. So apart from historiography, you can't refer to sources. Sir.
No, I mean there is no need to, the emergence of Indian, which is the question.
Interpretation of early Indian history had experienced very significant changes over time.
Acha, third question. The interpretation of early Indian history had experienced many significant change over time. Is interpretation of the interpretation of early Indian history. So the interpretation is basically the historiography, right? So here I am simply asking about the historiography, not the sources, right?
Sources we can't include.
Here there is no need. So, any more question? Yes.
So when a question says evaluate, when a question says critically analyze, or when a question says comment, does he have to change our approach a little bit?
Exactly. Suppose they are evaluate. So evaluate is quite similar to critically analyze, right? But in evaluate, you are supposed to write some conclusion, right? In critically analyze, you simply write down the views and leave it, right? In comment, simply whatever has been given, you have to perceive it as right and you have to comment on that. That yes, you have to simply comment on that particular statement. You are not supposed to see around the statement in comment, right? So okay, then Nasir sir is coming and he is going to discuss about this world history. If you have any kind of query, and you can discuss with him, right? Okay, thank you.
Hello, I am Nasir, and I'll be taking the world history section, right? So, I think Piyush sir has discussed the first three questions of paper 2, all right? So, we'll be taking the fifth question, the sixth question, and the seventh question. As far as the fifth question is concerned, the fifth question is ultimately the Second World War brought the end of colonialism and imperialism and simultaneously boosted the rise of independent states. It's independent states. It's not independence, it's independent states. This is the fifth one. And fourth one is the crusade. Again, G is not there. Crusade against communism was even more imaginary than the specter of communism. And the sixth is a quote on Palestine. So we'll start with the fourth one. So what do you make of the fourth question? Which one? Fourth one? Yeah, we'll go to it. Anybody else? The crusade against communism was even more imaginary than the specter of communism. Yeah. You were discussing about McCarthyism.
I cannot get it that is the question asking overall over the whole world conflict, the crusade against communism in the whole world, or just specifically what individual countries?
It's an open-ended statement, right? First, we have to identify certain things. Whenever we are looking at a statement, the first thing is we have to see the context, understand the context, right? And see whether it is close-ended or is it open-ended. That is, it's like this can be related to McCarthyism, this can be related to the broader, the worldwide phenomena of communism, and then the crusade or the fight against communism, right? This is a very important statement given by A.J.P. Taylor, right? He was a historian, anyway. So now, whenever we are approaching any question, for example, the fourth one, the first thing we must analyze is number one is the context. The context over here is broadly let us say, the nature of Cold War, right? It's broadly the impact of the Second World War and the process of the formation of blocks, right? The difference in this particular paper, especially world history paper and contemporary politics or IR, is that you have to have a kind of, when you're writing the answer, the approach should be serious. The tone of your language should be serious. And the sentences should be very, very crisp. Small sentences, lesser use of adjectives. Right? So it shouldn't be like journalistic in tone. There should be a kind of seriousness when we are saying this. Now, the second is establishing the context. One is nature of Cold War, right? And specifically, you can also mention that because it's open-ended, you can also mention that, take an example of USA, for example. What happened during the period of Senator McCarthy and the whole idea of McCarthyism. Right? How deliberately the communist leaders or the people who were somehow associated with the left were being targeted. This is one way of looking at it, by establishing the context, which is, the thing is, crusade against communism. The language is very, very literary, and on the other hand is specter of communism. The specter of communism here means the fear of communism. The fear of communism, the threat of communism. So communism is seen to be a kind of threat. So the idea is, A.J.P. Taylor, for example, need not to identify the name of the writer, but the idea behind this is that the whole manner in which the anti-communist movement or anti-communist political movements took place all over the world, right? This was in comparison to the communist movement in comparison to the rise and spread of communism, it is almost like equal. Right? Let's take, for example, like the whole Balkan issue, then the establishment of communism and socialism in various parts of Eastern Europe, and then we see after 1950s, 60s that there is a counter movement, especially with USA at the helm, right? How it targets Korea, Vietnam, blocks China, and the whole Indo-China area, and then other parts of the world. So here we are supposed to write anything what we want, but the broad context has to be established first. So we cannot just start our answer. We have to properly understand the context, and in the opening lines, we have to address this issue. That what is the context exactly? We have to come to the point instead of forming a kind of introduction which is more loose than the quotation itself. So we have to pinpoint towards the context, number one. Number two is when you look at the looking at the statement, the second thing can be like understanding the content. When we say understanding the content, we mean the viewpoint. Let us say, are there any biases in the statement? Right? Is it for example, a statement given by Hitler on First World War or a statement given by Churchill on First World War will be two different standpoints. So first, after establishing the context, we have to establish, number two is the content of viewpoint, standpoint. Is it a neutral standpoint? Or is it a political statement? Is it a literary statement? So that thing has to be identified when we are answering a statement. So here it is more or less in between. This particular statement is neutral in the sense the crusade against communism was even more imaginary. It's like comparing both of them and saying that if communism, the threat of communism, the threat of the red flag, in the 50s, 40s, there was this continuous propaganda against and for the red flag, communism, that the communists will take over. On the other hand, the communists tried to block the capitalist ideas into coming in their own area like Balkans. So where there was communist rule, capitalist things were being blocked, capitalist ideas were being blocked, there was censorship, right? So if that was imaginary, this was even more imaginary, right? So this is a typical point of view which is coming from a standpoint which is towards the left. It is not in the center, it is not right wing, it is towards inclining towards left. So this, when you establish this, then people who know A.J.P. Taylor will understand that he was a Marxist historian. Right? So in a way, we try to go deep inside and then understand the content. Third is when you look the context and you've understood the context, the content, then the third point is now you analyze or answer accordingly. For example, if there is something like analyze, critically analyze, then you have to be critical towards both point of the view, critically both. If it is like, for example, comment, then you have to comment whatever you think. And this comment may be neutral with your own opinion, right? On the other hand, if there is something like simple, critically comment, then again you are giving your opinion with the negative aspects or positive aspects as well of your own statement. Okay, this is this. Then you say, okay, but there can also be another opinion on this. Now, thereafter, so basically, A.J.P. Taylor is hinting towards if the imagination of the communist world was a utopia, right? Because communism is seen to be as an utopia, another utopia. Communist ideal, the whole idea of having a classless society is seen to be a utopia, a dream. So if that was imaginary, then the whole criticism of communism, whole movement against communism was even more imaginary. Now, yeah. This is your own standpoint. See, when they are loose-ended quotations or any quotations, it depends upon you. How you are explaining yourself, or how you are thinking. Because again, it depends upon the interpretation of the reader, interpretation of you, your interpretation. How you're looking, how you're going to look at this. The thing is, to be very like on the safe ground, you have to first hit at the context, establish the context, then see the content and establish what point of view the author is taking, right? And then the important details, for example, in this particular thing, crusade against communism and all, you can discuss the various events in Indochina, if possible, main dates and main events, main years maybe, and then something about McCarthy, right? Senator McCarthy in US, and how 50s and 40s were troublesome, especially 50s and 60s were troublesome for these people, let us say the communists, the leftists. Then you can finally give your own answer or conclude it. Second, now fifth question is, ultimately the Second World War brought the end of colonialism and imperialism and simultaneously boosted the rise of independent states. Analyze. So what do you think about this answer, this question? Yeah, everything has.
Like, first you say on the ideological platform, how can you fight for freedom if you're denied the freedom in your own colonial subjects?
Mhm.
Basically, we can say that Second World War broke
First, establishing the context. Establishing the context.
context is basically how immediately afterwards
Impact of Second World War.
impact of Second World War we see even just 15 years after the end of Second World War, colonial powers have receded from their colonies, more specifically like India and colonies in Africa and all that. You can say that this is why how Second World War brought about such a rapid change that a system which was established for 200 years immediately evaporated in the space of about 50 years.
All right, it becomes another impact of Second World War, and
And then we can go on to elaborate that, first of all, it had an economic,
what is the viewpoint reflected in this particular statement? What is the bias, maybe, if possible, of the statement, or is it a neutral?
maybe a bias like it was not driven by the independence movement, but rather because of the conditions brought about by the Second World War that the colonial masters were forced to grant independence to the subjects.
Or rather, like Second World War was significant, was powerful enough, was impactful enough to lead the rise of independent states. On the other hand, if you see the rise of independent state, that automatically means the fall of the colonial power. So is it safe to say in this particular context that imperialism and colonialism, they declined after Second World War? Is it? This is what the statement is saying, right? Brought the end of colonialism and imperialism. Now the other thing is, what's the difference between the two? Colonialism and imperialism.
So, imperialism, the difference is that a colony, suppose a country is a colonial master, so it has certain territories which have a separate status from the original colony, like England and India.
Okay.
It has separate status. England and India were different political entities in a sense, but England dominated over India. And imperialism could be said that, let's say in the sense of Germany and
British Empire and so British imperialism and British colonialism.
British imperialism could be sense of Ireland. That Ireland, British was conquered Ireland, but it was not a colony because Ireland was not a different political entity. It had like membership in the Irish Kingdom was there in the British Parliament. Could we say that in that sense, there's a difference between colonialism and
Any other opinion? What can be the difference between imperialism and colonialism?
In imperialism, you don't have to be the colony actually. It might be example of South American countries have a relationship with America. Or South American have a relationship with the British at that time. They were economic imperialism. They were not actually in the political control. They were not the colonies, but they were imperialism. But hence, different in India, they were colony as well because they have the political control, administrative control, plus they have a imperial control. So India is a colony as well as imperialism.
See, whenever we are writing an answer of history, the first thing we have to be very specific is what time, what period. Imperialism, colonialism, what period are we referring to? When we say colonialism, what is the exact period? We can write it vaguely, but the thing is, we have to be specific. Which period are we? When we say colonialism, we are basically referring to the period starting from the 16th century, 15th and 16th century. Basically, the Spanish and the Portuguese empires in South America and then in Asia and all. So that from there till now, some say that it is colonialism. Some say the impact, the working is colonialism. On the other hand, the spirit driving it is imperialism. See, the phenomena, the action is colonialism. The spirit behind it, the soul behind it is imperialism. Because we have references of imperialism in the Roman Empire too. Right? Roman Empire, we have many references after that also. So there are references to imperial tendencies. Imperialism is a tendency of expansion, basically expansion. Colonialism is the working of imperialism, working of the design of imperialism. Right? So here, the statement coming back, then again it's simple that it was the impact of the Second World War, according to the writer, which led to the rise of independent state. Here what you can do is, you can say the context that it is basically, this statement refers to an impact of the Second World War, and the whole process of decolonization is being seen in this regard. Decolonization is being seen as an important impact of Second World War. Then you can go on with decolonization and then write the important details and then come to it. Finally, when you look at the sixth question, Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or French to the French. It is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on Arabs. Surely it would be a crime against humanity to reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews partly or wholly as their national home. Who is the writer? Any guesses? It's M.K. Gandhi, right? It's Gandhi's statement, basically. So it need not to know who wrote this, but what do you think, what do you make out of this statement? It is definitely pro-Palestine, right? 1, 2. What is he trying to say? What is the writer trying to say? First, the context is the Palestine question. Context is the Israel-Palestine question, basically the Palestine question. And trying to understand the occupation, the nature of occupation. Is it justified or not? So, according to the statement, yeah. Yeah, this is a context. And the other thing is, this particular statement hints towards 2 or 3 things. One is, it takes a definite point of view that it considers Palestine to be a nation. Political. The context is political vis-a-vis the religious angle of the Jews or Judaism or Zionism. So he is basically, or the writer is basically hinting towards a political solution, and he is hinting towards a kind of political view. Its view is political, not religious, number one. This is clear. And the other thing is, religions and religious things shouldn't be forced on nations. For him, basically, nation in this regard is a political kind of category. Political category. Secular, yeah, because again the secular term in the European sense and the Indian sense will differ. In the Western sense, right, that a state should be different from religion. So the foundation of a state or a nation should necessarily not be based on religion. This is one. And then it is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on Arabs. Imposition. Criticism of Western power and criticism of the Zionist ideology. Zionism, definitely Zionism as a form of imperialism. Okay, who was the founder of Zionism? There are many. Now the term Zionism, the founder of the Zionist movement. Theodor Herzl. Theodor Theodor Herzl, right? He was the founder of Zionism, and basically he wrote books. And in 1896, he wrote one book on this particular issue. And then he gave his idea of, let us say, Zionism. And this was later on supported by people like David Ben Gurion. Right, David Ben Gurion, who became an important person in the formation of the state of Israel, the country Israel. Right, one. Two, on the other side, you have Arab nationalism. An Arab nationalism which was developing in this whole area, Palestine, in this whole area. This was not Nasser. It was like basic. This in 1920s it was developing, 1920s and 30s. He comes later. Basically, it was under one Amin al Husseini, right? The main leader, right? Amin al Husseini, Husaini. So you have two important leaders. There were other leaders as well who supported the thing. Now, then here, also important will be in this particular answer, the declaration of the separation or the recognition of separation of Israel and Palestine by the UN Assembly. That resolution. A resolution which said that it will be divided into, state of Palestine will be divided into two independent states, one Palestine and the other Israel. Now this resolution, which is famously referred to as Resolution 181 second, Resolution 181 second part, this became important. Now it led to, we all know what we can mention over here is that number one, context. The context is this whole question. Number two, this statement is pro, let us say, pro-Palestine, pro the cause of Palestine, and the pro-Arab kind of statement. And it's definitely anti-Zionist argument. And this argument also reflects a kind of political answer, right? And it is a political view on this particular issue. Number two, it is not a religious view, right? And the other thing which is obviously this statement, because we know it's written by Gandhi, so it's basically not from an Arab standpoint, it's from a neutral standpoint, which tilts towards the Arab thing, right? And now, so surely it would be a crime against humanity. So here the humanitarian aspect is coming into it. To reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews partly or wholly as their national income. So basically the conflict, how the conflict developed, this resolution of 1947, the UN resolution, and then the Arab war, Arab-Israel war, then the 90s, basically the important things, and how under Yasser Arafat, things were being tried. There were various points at which they were trying to find a resolution, especially with US coming in between, right? And then the recent conflict, again, the recent conflict, and how see, the thing is, you have to focus that there is a humanitarian angle to this question. Now other thing is, you have to have a neutral standpoint. You have to write the other argument as well, that the whole yearning of the Jews, the thing they got, the treatment they were meted out in during the Holocaust, especially, and this whole nature of Zionism, right? Because Israel as a Zionist state is seen as an imperialist state, right? Imperialist state, and its stand and its actions are often seen as to be kind of, let us say, discriminatory one, ethnic cleansing, sort of ethnic cleansing, right? Racist, basically, ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and the Arabs, and the whole notion of Arab identity. See, Arab identity was a very important identity in the 20s, 30s. An Arab need not to be a Christian. He can be a Christian, he can be a Jew, he can be a Muslim, right? The identity was more important. For example, one of the writers, Edward Said, you might have heard of him. He was a commentator, basically political commentator, historian and all. He was very vocal towards it, but he was a Christian. So the thing is, the Arabs identify themselves as Arabs first, then their religion comes next. It's only after the radicalization, post 60s, 70s and all, that we see that the religious identity becomes a crucial question. Or the sectarian identity, the Shia Sunni identity becomes important. Right? It's during the 20s and 30s and 40s, especially post the fall of Ottoman Empire and the rise of Nasser and Tito and others and Kemal Ataturk, right? That we see a kind of Arab nationalism developing. So Arab nationalism on one hand and Zionist ideology on the second hand, and then comparison between the two, and then finally you conclude that talks and all are the solution. The thing is, you have to be different from a candidate who is writing as an IR student on the same issue. The difference can only be brought out if you write from a kind of historical, you give a historical chronology, right? You are not vaguely answering it. You are fixing time, the development of time, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, briefly, and recent. If you are writing from an IR point of view, you will be focusing on what all can you see now, not the historical development. As a student of history, when you are approaching this paper, then you have to look at these things: Cold War, globalization, disarmament, and NAM, non-aligned movement, UN. These questions, these concepts, these topics have to be seen from this point of view. And the other thing is, you cannot guess from where this particular statement can come, what kind of statement can come. The only thing you can do is situate it, identify the context, and then try to identify the standpoint of the writer, the view of the writer, and then whatever you know, write it accordingly. Right? Any more questions? All right. Any answer to this? How the Arab identity is defined if it is not defined in terms of religion? It's a region. It's a region-centric identity. It's basically the southern Leviathan. When we say Leviathan, we basically mean these whole countries: Syria, Iraq, Palestine, and all. The Mediterranean area, right? The Eastern Mediterranean area, Southeastern Mediterranean area specifically, which includes includes Egypt, Morocco also, right? And other Libya, and then there Syria, Palestine, and Jordan, and these countries. So basically, the Arab identity is a thing which came into being in 1910, 20s. Two things happened. One, the Ottoman Turks and the Caliphate was being dismantled and it was done away with finally. Number two, the second thing which comes into being is the British occupation. This growth of Arab nationalism was a reaction to British imperialism, and the crisis which was being also created through the pressure which was coming from the Balkans, Turkey, remember? So all these things, they combine together and make this area very, very palpable, right? What? Reference book. See, most of you must be knowing that this one, normal low, is fine. The other is there is Ralph and Burns World Civilization Volume A, B, and C. Basically, C volume will be good if you are looking for a concise kind of material, right? Ralph and Burns World Civilizations Volume C, right? It's called Ralph and Burns. Have a look at it, then you will understand that it's very Ralph and Burns World Civilizations Volume C. Volume A is ancient and volume B is medieval. And there are many books. There's David Thompson, Europe since Napoleon. David Thompson, Europe since Napoleon. That is one another good book. But again, it is too academic in orientation. There is James Joel, good book on history. But then it will be quite lengthy, quite thick. All right. James Joel, Joll, on world history. All right. Thank you.